Hi guys, and welcome to another Divi video. This is Jamie from System22 and webdesignandtechtips.com. Well, today we've got another button effect for you. We've got a nice little button that shakes here, and when you hover on it, it stops shaking and it grows. And that's going to be seen on any site right there. Really easy to do. We've got to write a bit of code for this today, but don't let that put you off. Any code that I write I'll put below the video, and you're welcome to use it and change it as you wish. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is enable the Visual Builder. Once enabled, let's go down to where we want to go, and I'll simply want to insert a Divi simple button module. And there we have it right there. Fantastic. Okay, put in what you want your button to say up here. And obviously put in the link where you want to take your visitors that click on the button, just down below in the link here. If you're linking to your own site, keep it in the same window. If you're linking to an external site, go ahead and put it in a new tab. That way your site stays open. Let's just move this over here so we can see our button. Let's move on to our design tab. I'm going to go to alignment, the top one there. You can put it left where it is at the moment, right, or in the middle. I want mine in the middle. Text I'm not going to change at all. You can either make it dark or light here. For me at the moment the light works fine. The reason my button's actually purple is that's the way I've got it set up in my theme customizer. But we can totally style our button here also. So on the next tab down in button, use custom styles for button. Button text size is fine, text color is fine. I'm going to change the color background. Let's change that to blue. There we go. And I'll make the border the same color. Now when we hover over it, I want it to remain blue. So let's make sure that's going to work. And common to most Divi modules, if you hover over the dark legending there, you'll see these icons appear. If there's a little arrow, it'll give the opportunity to set a desktop state, that's basically when your mouse is not hovering over it, and a hover state where your mouse is hovering over it. Now I'm going to keep mine blue for this, so we don't need to change anything, but if you wanted to have a different color on hover, that's where you put it in there. Okay, well let's roll on down a bit more. I don't want to make it rounded corners. Border radius can give it more rounded corners if you want to. If you notice when I hover over it, there's a little icon there. For me, I don't particularly want it. If you do, there's plenty to choose from here from Elegance Themes icons. And if you want it to show all the time instead of just when you hover on it, just flip that little button that says only show icon on hover for button to no, and it'll show all the time. But I don't want it, so I'm going to switch it off right here. Okay, spacing. Well, I do want to make my button a bit chunkier. So let's give it, say, 15 pixels top. Just put in the 15, it'll put in the pixels for you. Hit the chain, it'll do the opposite side. And let's give it 30 pixels left and right. There we go, that's a nice chunky button right there. Great. Well, I'm not going to put any box shadow on today, but what I will do, when I hover over it, I want it to actually grow. So I'm going to go down to transform. And the first one right here is scale. And I want it to grow just when we hover on it. So again, if you hover over the dark legending, hit the little arrow. On regular state, I want it to be normal. On hover state, I want it to grow by perhaps 20% or whatever works for you. 30% is fine too. Now you can do sides differently if you uncheck the chain there, but I wanted them both to stay the same. And you can either type in the value or you can use the sliders, and you can fine tune with the little arrows to the side there. That's going to work for me. So on hover it's going to be that size, and when we're not hovering on it, it's going to be that size. Now the time it takes to transition from desktop to hover state by default is 300 milliseconds with Divi. I want to slow that down just a bit, so I'm going to go to the Advanced tab. I'm going to go down to Transitions and transition duration. You can either use the slider or type in a value. I'm going to say, let's give it half a second, 500 milliseconds. Don't want any delay. I want it to happen as soon as they put their mouse over there. And the speed curve that I like to use for these transitions is ease in, ease out. They're all slightly different and they'll work better in some situations than others, so do check them out. But for most hover effects on my buttons, I like to use this ease in, ease out. Okay, now we've got to write some code for this to make it shake side to side like the button you saw earlier, like the one that's on the left there. And to do that, we've got to give it a CSS class so that we can actually target it with CSS. So if we go back up to the top of our advanced tab, here's CSS IDs and classes. I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to call it something that makes sense to you. So I'm going to call it BT for button, SK for shake. btsk. That's great. Now what we need to do is go to our theme customizer, which is where we're going to write the actual code. To get there, go to your dashboard, down to Divi, and there you'll find theme customizer. You can also get to it if you go to your dashboard, down to appearance and customize. They're both exactly the same thing. I've got mine open already here, but I'll need to refresh the page because we've updated the code there. So I'm just going to click on the button to refresh the page. Okay, we can now target this, and we've got that class, and the class we had was, all classes have to have a dot or a period in front of them, so it's dot. Don't worry too much about copying this in real time. I'll put this code below the video and you're welcome to copy it, use it how you will. So we said button BT and shake SK. Open and close some curly brackets. Inside there we've got to create an animation, and to do that the first thing we want to do is give it an animation name. So that's animation-name and the name that we want to give it, and again we will give it something that's going to make sense. So let's say B for button, SHK for shake. We don't want to give it the same as our class up there. Semicolon. Okay, and how long do we want it to take to do this? Well, I want it to shake back and forth fairly quickly, so let's say a second. So I'm going to say animation duration dash duration colon 1 second semicolon. And how many times do we want it to shake back and forth? You can say 1, 50, 100. I want it to be continuous. So what I'm going to say is animation iteration count. I'm going to say infinite. Animation iteration count. And I'm going to say infinite. So it's just going to keep going and keep going and keep going, which is great. Now we've given it a name and a time and how long it's got to do it for. We've got to tell it what it's got to actually do. And to do that we're using keyframes to do this. So we'll say at keyframes and then the name that we gave it, which was bshk, button shake. And then we want to open and close some curly brackets. And within here is where we can tell it what we want it to do. So let's start off at 0%. When it first starts, I'm going to have the margin on the left at 0, so it's going to stay exactly where it is. So at 0% we'd open and close some more curly brackets, and inside there I can say margin left, we're going to say 0 pixels, because we want it to stay exactly where it is. Great. Well, let's move on down. Let's do 50%. And for the 50%, I want the margin left to be perhaps minus 15 pixels. So it's going to move it to the left by 15 pixels. And then when it revolves around again after the seconds ended, it's going to start off at 0 pixels. So that's going to create the shake. So let's say margin left again. I'm going to say negative minus 15 pixels. Now let's publish this and refresh the page. There we go. Now after we refresh, as you can see, the button's starting to shake and they're both in sync there. Okay, but when we hover on it, it's going to grow and it's still going to shake. I don't want it to shake when we hover on it. I want it to be still when we hover on it like this. So to do that, we'll create a hover state for the class. So let's put in the class again, which is button shake, btsk. But we want to create a hover state. So after the K with no gap, I'm going to put a colon and then no gap again and the word hover, and open and close some curly brackets. And I want to make sure that I've got the margin left to 0. No change. It just wants to be on 0 all the time. So to make sure of that, to override anything else, I'm going to write important, exclamation, important after it, and that will stop it shaking when we hover on it. So now when I hover over it, it's not shaking anymore, which is just the effect that I wanted. So there you have it. There's how to create a shaking button that grows when you hover on it and stops shaking. And like I say, that's going to be pretty eye-catching. You don't want too many of those on a site. It'll drive people crazy, but it's certainly going to draw their eyes to it. So I hope you've enjoyed that today and found it useful. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, this has been Jamie with System22 and webdesignandtechtips.com. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.